Hello everyone, this is SteamedIguana, and welcome to the first episode of Monsterverse Madness, where I'll be releasing a review of the Monsterverse movies every week leading up to Godzilla vs. Kong. It's gonna be quite a ride, and I hope you'll join me for it. And speaking of the Monsterverse, man, the more I think about movies that have come out over the past few years, the older I start to feel. Godzilla 2014 came out 7 years ago now. 7! I remember being so hyped for that movie, seeing it over 5 times in theaters, to the point I fell asleep because I'd seen it that many times. To this day, it might just be the Godzilla movie that I've seen the most. But after a couple years, the impact it had made on little 13-year-old me had soured, and for a while, I really didn't like Godzilla 2014. People trying to compare it to literally every Godzilla-related media thereafter didn't help either. But recently, I've been wanting to watch it again, and see if the SteamedIguana that was so into this movie that he saw it multiple times in theaters is still there. So in this first episode of Monsterverse Madness, let's go take a look at where it all began, as we review Godzilla. In 2014, it had been 10 years since the last Godzilla movie. 10 years that no new stuff was really coming out for the Big G. Not that I really cared when I was that young. I can't even remember what was happening in 2004. All I knew is that I loved me some kaiju movies, and a couple years later, I saw a cool Godzilla movie on the shelf that had all the monsters in it, and my parents bought it, wanting to support my hobby obsession. After that, there was no new movie, until Legendary announced their new Godzilla movie slated for 2014. I cannot describe to you the amount of hype leading up to that movie I had. May 16th, 2014 is a date that will always be ingrained into my memory. That was also the peak of my time on the Godzilla side of Instagram, when I met all my friends on there like Titan Goji, Chicken Man. Ah, the memories.
Hey, what about me?
Oh hey, SpawnJr54. How's it going, man? Or actually, how did you even get in here? And no, I didn't know you quite yet. We're still a few years off from when I started getting to know you, Super Goji74, and the rest of G-Hustle. But yeah, I followed everything on this movie, to the point that I basically knew the entire plot going in. You gotta remember, this was the first Godzilla movie me and many of us younger G fans ever got to see in the theaters. I remember when we thought the M.U.T.Os were these weird little spider things, and that initial teaser trailer. God, that always got my heart rate going back then. That perfect bleak and dark tone for a teenager at the time. And even then, with all I knew going in, I thoroughly enjoyed the movie. I saw it first in IMAX 3D, and I still have the glasses, the special edition icy cup, and the ticket stub to this very day. And from there, like I said in the intro, I saw it multiple more times in theaters. I loved this movie.
I love it too. I remember when I was younger, I desperately wanted another Godzilla movie on the big screen. I didn't think it would take 10 years, but I think it's about time. All the times where there were Godzilla movies that were rumored to come out, they ultimately ended up being either scrapped or just fake rumors. Until either late 2012 or early 2013. Honestly, I can't remember the details. But I heard it was confirmed that there was a Godzilla movie in the works by Gareth Edwards. And I'm not gonna lie, I did happen to see all of the leaks from the Comic-Con trailer, and it got me super pumped. Like, this is it. This is the Godzilla movie excuse me, we've all been waiting for. Aside from the American movie in 1998, I gotta say, back then, it felt unreal to see another Godzilla movie coming to the big screen again. And from the moment I saw the trailer, I knew that this movie would do a great justice to the original Godzilla we all know and love.
And time went on. Well, I always did have a fond place in my heart for this movie. People calling it the best Godzilla movie and comparing it to everything Godzilla eventually started to really sour my tastes for it. I think there might have even been a point in time where I nearly outright hated it. But now, nearly 7 years since it was released, almost as long as the hiatus that it ended, have my thoughts changed? And I'm happy to say that after a rewatch, that the movie is a lot better than I remembered. Let's dig right into this. For starters, oh my god, the music in this movie is incredible. I remember when I first popped the disc in and heard this theme, I was immediately teleported back to all those times I saw the movie in the theater. Alexandre Desplat does a great job with doing music that's very subtle but fits in well with the tone they were going for. It might not be one that I'll remember or put on my playlist besides that banger of an intro, but it's very well done. The cinematography throughout is beautiful. Gareth Edwards certainly knows what he's doing in the director's chair, and there's still some sequences that leave my jaw dropped just because of how well they're put together. Pair that with the visuals, and the movie looks great, with all the monsters in this movie really being brought to life. Speaking of, Godzilla's design too, it hit that just right spot between something familiar and something different, with it being to this day one of my favorite designs, and at the time in 2014 being my absolute favorite. The M.U.T.Os too, what creative kaiju! I love their designs, and their abilities and dynamic in the story set them apart from a lot of other Godzilla kaiju that might have been similar. There's a reason that my name on Instagram for so many years was M.U.T.O the Official. I'd still rank them up there with my favorites next to Gigan and the like, and they sure give Godzilla one hell of a beating. Sure, you can see that Godzilla was far more powerful in the next movie, but you can't deny that here they nearly put him down for the count. As for the story, it's pretty good. I'm sure every G fan and their grandma knows what it is by this point, but it starts with the discovery of parasitic spores in 1999, one of which has escaped into Chak's Janjira nuclear power plant over in Japan, building its cocoon there and setting up the ties to our main character, Ford Brody, as his mom dies on that day, and Joe Brody, his father, is left as a broken man. 15 years later, the M.U.T.O, as the monster is called, breaks free and seeks to mate with the other spore, which was in Nevada. But Godzilla, being the ultimate cockblock, goes to stop them as they are a major threat to the balance of the Earth, which we learn a lot more about in the later movies. As they all converge for a final battle in San Francisco, it's a fairly good story, pretty well put together, and the first third is honestly fantastic, being carried by Bryan Cranston's performance as Joe Brody. He's honestly probably the best actor in this movie, and that's unfortunately where it starts to falter and we get into the more bad stuff. While in the period of time when I really disliked this movie, these were the things I would always point out without acknowledging the positives. But now that we have acknowledged the positives, these are the things that still really bother me about the movie. I was never too bothered by the fact that Godzilla didn't get much screen time. That's how a lot of his movies are. But the human characters, they're just uninteresting. Notice how I never mentioned Ford's wife and son in that plot synopsis. It's because they're hardly ever doing anything significant in the movie besides running from the monsters. They exist to give us a perspective in the city of the kaiju, and I guess to give Ford a reason to be doing what he is, but everyone, including Ford, is written so blandly, if at all, that he may as well be going to rescue his dog and goldfish. While it's serviceable, the only real standout performances in the movie are Bryan Cranston's character, who gets killed off way too early, and I feel would have made the movie a lot more interesting if he had survived, and Ken Watanabe's Dr. Serizawa. But alas, a movie cannot be carried on one-liners alone.
Let them fight.
I know that Aaron Taylor-Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen have acting chops. Just look at Kick-Ass and something like WandaVision. But I think the script just didn't really have that much in there for them to act, and more so just be bland, cardboard cutout characters, which is a shame and a big waste of acting potential. And for fuck's sake, the visuals in this movie are great, but on home release, you can't even see them. I had my TV's brightness turned up, and half the time, I couldn't see what was going on. This has nothing to do with the film itself, but it's a shame you can't experience it as good as it was in the theaters with the various DVDs and Blu-rays they've released. At least they seem to be fixing it with the upcoming 4K release. The last thing that bothers me about this movie, though, is that now, tonally, it's the odd man out from the entire rest of the Monsterverse. As solid a movie as this may be, it took itself very seriously despite things like Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and goofy stuff like that showing up in the movie. There isn't really any comedy and any real embracing of the more fun stuff that even the next movie in the Monsterverse would really lean into.
Keep your eyes open. Up in the trees, too.
Why?
Ants. Big ones. There's one. Sounds like a bird, but it's a fucking ant.
At the time, me and a lot of others loved that this was a more brooding Godzilla movie, but it was kinda left in a spot in the middle where a lot of the action going on was played up like a typical kaiju movie, but it was trying to be very serious in tone. And speaking of others, let me hand it back over to SpawnJr54 for his thoughts on the movie. I'm just wondering what you think, because I'm kind of the perspective of someone who lost touch with it over time.
You know, after watching all the other movies from the Monsterverse, from Kong Skull Island to Godzilla King of the Monsters, and pretty soon Godzilla vs. Kong, coming back to Godzilla 2014, the root of the Monsterverse, I gotta say, it's still intense, and I still love it to this day. Now, I do agree, in some points of the film, the acting was a bit bland, coming from Aaron Taylor Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen. Even though Bryan Cranston's character gave an amazing performance, and some actors got a little spotlight, aka Sally Hawkins, Golden Globe winner, also Akira Takarada as well. I still believe this film is good to a certain extent. I mean, aside from the bland acting, the very dim lighting, and the screen time of Godzilla, the story actually has me interested. I like how they made Godzilla to be an actual force of nature this time around. I mean, at this point, we've all known Godzilla to be either a force for good or evil, or occasionally both in previous incarnations. But I like how they made him out to be more of a monster that cares about the balance of nature and then some. Thanos knows what I'm talking about when it comes to balance.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
However, the movie to me is a solid 8 out of 10. I definitely found it to be a good and enjoyable film to watch, from the stories to the music and even the overall style of the film. And honestly, I wouldn't mind sitting down and watching it again. A lot of people say it's a fail, but at the end of the day, I'd say it's a win in my book. And that's all I gotta say on the subject. I'm gonna pass it off to my good friend SteamedIguana. Take it away, man.
For sure, it's always nice to get a new perspective on things.
Hey, sorry to interrupt if I was interrupting anything, but I just had a question. How did I get here?
I thought you let yourself into the cyber world. Ugh, did another alien come in and trap somebody in the cyber world?
Wait,
Oh. Well, anyways, at the end of the day, I feel that Godzilla 2014 is a fairly solid movie, if not a little dry with characters that just aren't all that engaging after the first act. Had the rest of the movie been as good as that first third, I feel that this would have been one of the best, but for me, it's my least favorite in the Monsterverse, especially when the movies afterwards had stronger characters and really started to lean into the campiness that people like myself love in their kaiju movies. But I can at the very least say that it's not as bad as I'd convinced myself that it was, and I'm glad that I went back and revisited it so now I can look back on this movie much more fondly. Just as little 13-year-old me did when he was in awe seeing the kiss of death for the first time in IMAX 3D that fateful day. And hey, if you enjoyed this first review in Monsterverse madness, be sure to let me know by hitting the like button and commenting down below. Do you think Godzilla 2014 is the greatest Godzilla movie ever? Or do you think it has its flaws and hasn't aged the best compared to the rest of the Monsterverse? And don't you worry, the Kong Skull Island one is coming up next. So be sure to subscribe and hit the bell button for more monkey! And until next time, G-fans, which won't be a 10-year hiatus, sayonara.